Welcome back, folks. The email address, thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. That's thefreedomlink@centurylink.net. Thank you for all of your emails and the support. I'm joined tonight by Dan, whose YouTube channel, EducatoriumEuphorium. And we were talking about the breakdown of the family structure. And so what do you think, Dan, as far as how the breakdown of the family structure has led to the degradation of society? Do you really think that, that occurred when, mom had to go to work and or like the women's lib movement took place? What do you think?
Well, yeah, just like to introduce though, is that one of the people who influenced me most in my political thinking is my dad. And my dad generally, he's not like one of those Rick Santorum social conservatives, but he's more of a libertarian kind of person.
Right.
But still, he always looks, because he was from the hippie generation, and he always looks back at that and says, I really wish I had known more, because the breakdown of the family is really kind of breaking down our civilization in sync. But the thing is that, like you said, I mean, if you look, to go back to the statistics for a minute, if you look at like poverty statistics, you'll see, like around 10%, then you'll look at single mothers and see it jump to like 33%.
Right. And
so you're right. I think part of it was like the women's lib movement, like go to work or whatever, but also, how welfare kind of incentivized single motherhood and whatever. And maybe not even like, it wasn't almost an incentive, but it changed the way the costs and the benefits worked. So the costs were lower and the benefits, stayed the same. So it was almost like the benefits went up.
Yeah.
And so, if you're going to end, it's going to encourage more of it. And so it was more than one thing. And I think you're right that also it was the women's liberation movement. And what's kind of ironic is it seems lately they've been kind of, I think I read somewhere they've been kind of saying, oh, look at all the mothers who are at work. It's
well, because they have to, because they have to. You can't be a one-income household anymore. So either you working dad into an early grave, and he's never around, which means that you don't have the male influence at home that especially young boys sorely need if they're going to not be so sissified, I guess you could say. You have to have that male influence. But if dad's at work all the time, or even mom, then who raises the kids? The public schools. And what good a job are they doing? They're not doing a good job. They can't even teach me. As a matter of fact, with this No Child Left Behind that Bush instituted, they teach to a test to make sure that they maintain their accreditation and therefore maintain their federal funding, which is a scam in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to – it's the collective that's important. You have to have the collective succeed. It doesn't matter if the individuals are not being able to exercise what their skills are in. It's just you got to have the collective, so then you keep getting your money. But, yeah, you're definitely right on that.
Let me ask you this. You brought up Rick Santorum. Is he a conservative?
He's definitely more conservative than a lot of people on that stage, but yeah, I'd say pretty well fit the conservative idea because he has that the socially conservative aspect where he's against abortion and against gay marriage and whatever. But it is that thing where you want to. He says, and he has credit because he stood up against a lot of Bush policies that were definitely not fiscally conservative. I mean, he did vote for Medicare Part D. But besides that, it seems he's mostly been pretty good on the government side of it. But it's like you said, the people who want to say, you can't watch what you want to watch on TV. We got to have the FCC step in and regulate everything. But it's fine. You can spend your money however you want.
That's absolutely right. That's the one thing about conservatism and liberalism and everything else that bothers me is that here we were given a framework that kind of laid out the basic architecture of how government could be, how government was supposed to be, how it's supposed to operate, what the powers were, what powers were reserved to the states or to the people. And what's funny is if you ask me, you're a good conservative if you follow the rules. I mean, isn't that part of being like a conservative is to follow the rules? You know, like, for example, you're a good conservative, which means, you know, lots of conservatives are Christian or religious based. So when you have an anti-abortion stance, typically it's faith-based. It's saying, well, you know, the Bible says, you know, thou shalt not kill, and this is killing, therefore I'm against abortion. So wouldn't a good conservative then be for the Constitution? What do you think?
Well, yeah, and the thing is that, you know, the Supreme Court has made all these decisions about abortion and whatnot, and so they do have to go to the trouble of going in and amending the Constitution to get their way on abortion and gay marriage and whatever. And the thing is, like you said, though, that conservatives, the problem with conservatism is that too often it has it's gone away from this original intent, like you said, and now it's become so the conservatism, something dangerous that seems to be happening with the Tea Party movement, which is really a really mainstream, almost libertarian movement, besides sometimes its social tendencies, is that the Republican Party is trying to swallow it. And the Republican Party swallowed conservatives, so a lot of times conservatives became Republicans first and conservatives second. That's why people who are supposedly conservative, you know, they would always stand up for Bush, even though Bush has an indefensible record on liberty, and from civil liberties to economic liberties. And, you know, people who are supposedly conservative, you know, just a couple days ago I heard on CNN, David Frum supposedly conservative, but he's attacking this guy who's based all his decisions and whatever in purely constitutional principles.
John King, you got anything to add to this conversation?
Yes, Joe. I'm curious to find out how the information that he has, that he's putting out there, how the young children his age receiving this information.
Yeah, how do they take it when you start talking about stuff like this? Are you finding that the information is well received, or do you get any backlash from it?
Well, like at the co-op that we go to, people start laughing because whenever they make us write like papers pretty often, and they'll always start laughing because I'll always find and we write them about like literature or whatever. So no matter what book it is, I'll always find a way to tie in economics, and they'll always laugh. They'll be like, "Oh, well, if you didn't add economics into it, we would be suspicious. Did you really write this paper?" But yeah. So some people just don't. So kids who have had this kind of base in the ideas of capitalism seem to receive it better. But a lot of the problem is that and this is something that we really need people like Richard Mayberry who write economic ideas at a level that everyone can understand, which is you can't really talk to people about politics if they don't even, you know, understand economics or whatever. And too often, you know, even college students, you know, they don't understand the principles of economics. You gotta have that base.
Well, one thing that we can all say is that it boils down to this: you can't spend money you don't have. That's rule number one, economics 101. Now, the United States, however, is one of the few countries that does it quite often, does it a lot, and it's all because of the Federal Reserve. So, what's your stance on the Federal Reserve? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's much more complicated because that's just going beyond things like things that are like the welfare state or corporate welfare or whatever, something like that you can see in you can look at economic incentives and whatever. With the Federal Reserve, I mean, I think we talked about Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, which is all about how the Federal Reserve came about. It's so complicated, and they throw up so many layers, and the money trail is just so far over the world. You know, it's much harder to understand something like the Federal Reserve. And, you know, my favorite guy, Milton Friedman, he didn't think we should end the Fed, really. I don't think anyway. He said that we should more just, you know, rein it in. And people like G. Edward Griffin say we should completely end the Fed. So I think I'd more be on the line of end the Fed and let the market decide the price of money, because that way there wouldn't be these wicked fluctuations, and it, you know, it would be much more easy to plan for your future.
I totally agree. I'm an end the Fed proponent, and the reason why is because we shouldn't have a private bank having direct impact on things dealing with our national security and our economic well-being. Really, it affects the very heart of our national security, if you think about it. And a lot of people don't understand that the Federal Reserve